The following speech was written for Trans Day of Remembrance 2024 for an event that was held in Sheffield at the Winter Gardens, where I spoke on the intersection of sex work and transness. And it was the first time that they had had a sex worker speak, despite the fact that such a huge proportion of trans murder victims are sex workers. It's an intersectional problem. I will provide all of my sources down in the doobly-doo. Nearly half of the 2023 trans murders monitoring list for whom a profession was known were sex workers. For Europe, that rises to 3/4, 78%. Sex work can provide a vital income for trans people when other avenues are shut off to them. However, this often means that trans sex workers have to weigh up their own transition goals against what is marketable and frequently have to accept invasive fetishization of their transness. People go into sex work for a huge variety of reasons, and there are many, like myself, for whom it was mostly a choice. But trans people are more likely than their cis counterparts to be entering the industry for economic survival reasons, because they have struggled to find or retain other work and/or in order to fund gender-affirming treatments which can be slow, traumatic, or sometimes simply impossible to access through the NHS. There's also something to be said here about the fact that trans people are nearly twice as likely as cis people to be disabled, another demographic which is overrepresented in sex work. As sex work is often uniquely more flexible, it can be done from home, and it can be profitable in short bursts that can be fitted around changeable capabilities. But other speakers have talked more eloquently on the intersection of transness and disability than I can. Society so often stigmatizes sex workers. Our deaths are the punchlines in bad jokes, and many sex workers feel unable to tell their family or friends what they do for work for fear of negative reactions and rejection, or worse. When we can't talk openly about our work, it makes it easier for us to be taken advantage of, to be abused without the fear of consequences. This is compounded, of course, by transness and belonging to many other marginalised groups. You might have seen jokey discussions about whether raping a sex worker is actually just theft. What's in one of the hundreds of dead hooker jokes? You might not know that someone you love is a sex worker, but the chances are that someone you love is or has been. We are just heavily pressured to keep it quiet, lest we upset someone with the inappropriate topic or discover that our queer friends hold whorephobic views. Just like casual transphobia takes time and effort to unlearn, make the time and the effort to unlearn the casual whorephobia in our culture. In most of the world, aspects of sex work are criminalised. The Nordic model, criminalising buying but not selling of sex, is often heralded as a win for sex workers and is unfortunately supported by our Labour Party. But in reality, it means the criminalisation of many of the things that we use to keep ourselves safe. It assumes that reducing demand for sex work is both the ideal and something that is actually achievable. Studies of various systems of controlling sex work have repeatedly shown that the demand will always be there, and under a capitalist system, the need for the work always will be too. Criminalisation just makes the workers, both voluntary and trafficking victims, drastically less safe. Here in the UK, the sale of sex is legal when taking place in private, but controlling prostitution for gain, or brothel keeping, are not. While the law is, of course, intended to target pimps, it also catches the PA who helps them do their emails or accounts, the boyfriend who drove her to her booking, or the housemate who cleans up and acts as security for their two housemates seeing clients at home. Soliciting on the street, or even just loitering if you are known to be a sex worker, is an offence in the UK. And workers can be fined up to £500 for doing so, or £1,000 if they have a previous conviction, and they gain a criminal record, which makes it even harder to leave the industry for other kinds of work if they wish to. What workers need is full decriminalisation, removing all sex work-specific offences so that workers can support each other to work safely without the fear of prosecution. This is not the same as legalisation, which would mean that sex work would be controlled and regulated by the government. Legalisation leads to encroachment on the human rights of workers. It encourages larger managed brothels that can afford to meet the requirements while taking control away from workers, and still penalises marginalised workers who cannot afford to comply with the regulations. When sex workers are in this grey area of legality, it is horrendously common for law enforcement to use that as leverage to further extort and abuse them, knowing that these acts are unlikely to ever be reported. Brittany Hernandez Varg was a sex worker in Veracruz, Mexico. She and her partner were beaten by state officers in an illegal search of her home. She went to hospital for her injuries, where she remained and eventually died more than a month later. Many sex workers in Mexico report that state police are regularly harassing them, asking for unpaid services and illegally searching their homes, stealing in the process, safe in the knowledge that these workers do not feel safe to report their abuse. Valentina de Paz was the vice president of the collective of trans women and sex workers of the Tribal, Guatemala. She was shot whilst inside a bar and then was brought out onto the street to bleed to death. When police arrived, they forbade anyone from providing her with first aid because it could contaminate the crime scene. Members of the collective talked of Valentina as a great person and a great human being. They said she leaves in each heart a bit of her love, her joy, her spontaneous smile. Several other trans people on the Trans Murders Monitoring List for 2023 were murdered by police or died whilst in state custody. Many trans people already feel unsafe around law enforcement, and sex workers doubly so. So I am grateful that the decision was made not to have a police presence at the Sheffield Trans Day of Remembrance service that this speech was written for. In the 2023 data, the situation for trans sex workers in Peru is particularly shocking. The following trans sex workers were killed in the streets and hotels where they worked: Erica Quintana, Ale Castillo, Fiorella Melgarejo, Camila Sanchez, Ruby Ferrer, Priscilla Aguedo, Catalaya, Stephanie Yamakoto. Their murders were committed by local mafia in order to threaten and extort other trans and cis sex workers in the region. One study found that about 60% of trans women in Peru rely on sex work for their main income. Selling sex is not illegal in Peru, but as we so often see around the world, authorities try to sweep it under the rug by making work, especially street-based work, difficult for sex workers. With verbal and physical abuse from police just for surviving, trans sex workers are unable to turn to the justice system for any kind of support, and frequently no arrests are made following their murders. Clients pose their own dangers, especially when the purchase of sex is criminalised in any way, meaning that clients are those already comfortable with some degree of breaking the law, reducing the social and legal barriers that stop them from assaulting, stealing from, or even murdering sex workers. Natalia Gonzalez Santiago was stabbed to death in a hotel in Mexico by a regular client. Susan Fernandez was stabbed by a client in her hotel room in Colombia. Neighbours attempted to help her and chased the attacker off, but she died later in hospital of her injuries. Ana Luisa Pantaleo was stabbed by a man in Sao Paulo, Brazil, who had hired her as a sex worker, but became violent when he discovered that she was a trans woman. Every person on this list deserved better. We deserve better. Visit decrimnow.org.uk to learn more about the UK efforts towards decriminalisation. Fight with us for it. If you are a sex worker, then join the Sex Workers Union, connect with your community. And if you're not, then try to be someone who sex workers won't feel judged by, who they can be honest with, who they can come to for help when they really need it. Together, we are stronger. This is the bit where I said that I'd be at the cool down and people could talk to me afterwards. But you can reach out to me by email, I guess, if you think I've missed something or you are a worker and you want connecting with your own group. Obviously, I talked about connecting with your community, and in the speech I gave in Sheffield, I linked to Sheffield communities and I talk about UK-based groups. but there are groups for decriminalisation in most countries, and there are sex worker groups probably everywhere. So I'll try my best to help you find yours, but maybe if you leave a comment and if you're looking for that, then other people might know in your area. I tried to get this out as close to Trans Day of Remembrance as I could. The actual service was last night. There were a lot of great speakers. Trans Day of Remembrance is a hard day for pretty much all trans people, but there was also trans joy. There was being in a room full of people being truly and authentically themselves, full of people accepting those around them for who they actually are. Nobody trying to shove each other in little boxes. As much as it can be easy to focus on the sad bits, on how much it hurts, as one of the other speakers said last night, the best thing you can do for those we've lost is to try and prevent us losing more in the future. It's to be hopeful. It is to fight for your rights and the rights of those around you. You don't have to be a sex worker to fight for decrim. I would love it if there were more allies who aren't sex workers who felt like they could. I mean, there's a very simple email your MP on decrimnow.org.uk that if you're UK based, it doesn't take long. I hope that you found this useful. And now there's going to be some outtakes, probably with my cat Tally trying to disrupt this, because she's like that. Just going to appease the cat. You want to come in? You're going to have to be quiet. People love you, but I don't. You're very distracting. Could you sit down at least? You helping? Could you please lie down? Please, please, please. Maybe I shouldn't have let you in. If you settle down, I can fuss you. Don't mind me, I'm just editing it for YouTube. Ale Castillo, Fiorella Melgarejo. Baby. There's a plane. I don't like planes. I need to soundproof this room. I am getting bored of waiting for the plane.